piece of art now, this year, as a special once-in-a-lifetime offer until we do it again, we have, you'll notice a big pile of books there. This is what we call the unlucky dip. In that somebody will get nominated from the audience to randomly pick one of these books, randomly open it, and read from it. And it will probably be really terrible. The idea is that we read bad books at you. You pay us to stop. Other unpleasant people in the audience may want to raise money for charity and pay us to continue.
Sometimes it's because we want to be all happy today.
Or you want to, stop it. You have the thing. You had the thing last night. Oh, okay. No, it was not rubbish. Or a bucket or anything. It was acceptable.
I like all the stuff that was there. Teacups over there.
No, big enough.
Not big enough. Probably going into a China teacup, maybe horribly wrong.
We have a variety of our usual authors, some of which you will know of, some of which will be starting in number 52.
Let's tell us who they are.
Let's break you in gently with Angus McCoy. You know, there's the series of children's books in the 1960s, 1957 actually, in the 60s, about a group of kids and their mentor called the Atom Chasers. They go all over the place chasing atoms, which is really rather futile because they're terribly hard to chase. And these are the atom chasers in Tibet. Now, what do people know about Tibet? It's often called the third pole because it's so wonderfully cold. And they have many traditional sports. And our heroes have got themselves in a bit of a sticky situation. And have had to take part in a sporting competition in order to get free of their captivity. This is chapter 10 entitled Sporting Contest. Yes. To open the proceedings, Love sang, that's the chief character, addressed his followers in a voice like a foghorn. Describing the contest and its purpose, both teams, as he announced them, were greeted with hearty cheers. Then, comparative silence settled on the crowd as Kit and Dorje mounted their horses and cantered to the starting post. Kit's mare was smaller than Dorje's grey stallion, and Nora was round as he heard the fat man increase the odds on his bet to 1. I'll show them what this proves. A lean-faced man with long, drooping moustaches, who appeared to be Long Simon's chief lieutenant, dropped a light flag. The horses were off. 5 times round the circle of flags was a distance. But at the end of the fourth circuit, Dorje was 10 lengths ahead of Kit, and the result was a foregone conclusion. The mare loaned by Charong was used to carrying loads, not to racing. Nevertheless, Kit was able to rally her to making a final effort, and Dorje won in the end by only 6 lengths, amid delighted applause. It was first blood to Tibet, and Sandy was taut and nervous as he accompanied Apu out into the evening to begin the pole vault.
Traditional Tibetan sport.
Few people know that pole vaulting is a traditional Tibetan sport. It's a bamboo pole, probably in Portland. If he were beaten, the contest would be over. He tested the long bamboo pole and for a moment experienced panic. Okay, I'm pole vaulting again. Why should I be experiencing panic? It seemed incredible that he'd be standing here in a lonely valley in bed, preparing to jump for his friend's freedom and his own. Suddenly he remembered his grandmother and father in Scotland. It felt better.
This is really dumb. I all pretending to stop. Seconded.
These are a series of books by an author called Diane Smith, one of Barry's favourites.
Because he can't write. I can write better than he can.
Well, no, the problem is that he can't, isn't that he can't write, is he cannot write well. He only writes frequently. Obviously.
And keep publishing it.
He was actually the inspiration for Brian Romley's beginnings as a horror writer.
Yes, well, at least Brian can write.
Yes, because he thought, I can do better than this.
And he went out and proved it.
This is one of the necklaces.
Crabs move.
Giant crabs. Invading a small seaside. In Britain this week.
That firing on Shell Island tonight.
His voice was a hoarse whisper, his features white with strain and shock.
The island has been attacked, virtually destroyed. There's nothing left of all the WD buildings and equipment, and they won't know until daylight how many lives have been lost. Attacked?
Winterbottom was incredulous.
By whom? By hundreds of giant crabs as big as cows. I didn't believe it at first, but I do now. It sounds crazy, but it's true. The ministry reckon this coastline is crawling with them. That's what hit our boat out there tonight. We went right over the top of them, scraped our hull on their shells. Jesus Christ Almighty! If they wanted, they could have overturned the Ocean Queen, and done to us what they did to Shell. But they were too intent on attacking the shore to worry about us. We'll have to evacuate the camp.
Ricky Winterbottom felt that he was expected to come up with something.
Get everybody to safety.
Can I put a pound in? Because I hear you talk all the time at home. Is this the stop or just keep going?
I presume that was a stop.
That was a stop. You wouldn't pay more money to make it pay.
I'll put 150 in to carry on.
I'll put another pound in to stop.
So that's
I'll ask for another pound to carry on.
okay, I think we've got to carry on.
Yeah,
That's just what we don't have to do.
Miles Manning slid a King Edward cigar out of his case, took his time unwrapping the cellophane and piercing the end, collecting his day's thoughts whilst he got it going.
This is going to be one of the biggest military operations since the last war. Already the army are setting up roadblocks and blocks of defences. They expect the crabs to come ashore again in force at any moment. But if we play this right, we can turn it to our advantage. If what you say is true, then there won't be much of the camp left if these crabs come ashore again. Well, I think we're in a very fortunate position.
Manning blew a cloud of smoke up into the ceiling and smiled. His confidence had returned.
We've got good defences here because when this place was built, the seawall was strengthened and built right up to keep the high tides back. First thing in the morning, I want every casual labourer from row sweepers and luggage boys to Mainford's Bend down by the jetty sandbagging. Damn it, we can keep these bloody crabs out, no bother.
Like the immigrant clubs.
Absolutely.
And these folks in the camp will love it because they all know they're safe. Our man in the street is a ghoul who loves to watch carnage from safety, and by God, he's right in the pound seat here. We'll make our name. Whilst everybody else is being wrecked, the Blue Ocean Holiday Camp will remain invincible.
Please, please, please.
I'll have another quid, because let's face it, I'll be putting up roadblocks to stop crabs. What the hell was Guy thinking?
Stop.
Is this the stop?
Yes.
Never know what happens to the Blue Ocean Holiday Camp.
Come up and take my money.
So, The next book is
Adrift in the Stratosphere.
Oh.
By Prof. A.M. Lowe.
who was head of the British Interplanetary Society.
So this guy should know his space.
Is this
We
the
hope.
one where we find where all the punctuation's gone?
Yes, that's where all the punctuation's gone.
Yes.
And the Earth
Oh,
is
yes,
surrounded
this-
by the lumiferous ether.
This may require some spoken well.
Yes,
probably.
all the punctuation that's spoken.
Just to let you know, I do have painkillers in my bag for anybody who might be
I might need want to punch me after. Chapter 6. Mars sends the death ship. It gets like that very quickly.
Yeah.
Look there! Exclamation mark. Philip shouted the words in horrified alarm as his two companions spun round and gazed in the direction of his pointing finger. At the end of the captain, there was the Aeronauticus. Philip could see a number of men. ... If men they could be called. So why is that ... in the middle of the sentence?
It's a dramatic pause.
Well, it's a pause. I wouldn't say it's dramatic.
Everyone.
They were taller and stouter than more human beings, and their very heads seemed to scrape the roof of the cabin. They were dressed in vivid colours, some in red, others in greens, but the most terrifying parts of them were their faces. Vicious, malignant faces that Philip seemed to bear two noses and an additional ear on their foreheads.
God, the first frontier.
And for the change from Final Frontier. Are we just offering money up for bad ear jokes?
Yes, please. A pound, because ear, I've had enough of that. Vicious, malignant faces that seem to bear two noses with an additional ear on their face. What is that? ? Demanded Peter Hadley in alarm. He could see nothing. If he could see nothing, what's he asking about? And Philip seemed to be pointing into thin air. You can't see anything? ? Philip blinked and rubbed his hand across his eyes. Heavens, you must see them. Look, man! ! Men, I tell you! ! He'd really like to get the mileage out of these exclamation marks. In red and blue. Are you blind? Look! There! At that exclamation mark that's at the end of this sentence. He pointed a trembling finger towards the other end of the cabin. Peter looked at the third space traveller, Victor Stanwich, and there his face was alarmed. Was this some new terror from the Red Planet? Some new horror that had gripped Philip before it had even taken hold of Peter and Victor? He's seeing things, said Peter gravely. It's Mars again, of course. Pull yourself together, Phil, I continued, trying to control his alarm. Look at us. Do we look all right? Oh, yes, you seem all right. Why, Philip? Vaguely. But look! There's another exclamation mark. Can't you see that man in the bright red dress? Hang on.
It's Dave.
So it's Dave with an ear on his head and two notes. Oh, good God.
Sounds alarmingly accurate.
I know. Stranger things happen at conventions.
Stranger things happen in books.
Do you not see that man in the red dress? Well, he's pointing a finger at me now. Look! Look! Exclamation mark. Peter and Victor stared in the direction indicated, but they saw nothing. Nothing except rows of cylinders and masses of intricate equipment.
Try to Peter stop, I think you might have a seizure.
There's more exclamation marks coming up.
Oh, that's a pound.
I don't touch it yet because I don't want to find out it is Dave Trace.
So it's a pound 20.
This is Dom, which is version of Battlestar Galactica.
Is that going to stop? So it's pound 80 to stop. Another pound to stop.
All stopping money. More
No,
stock
no,
money.
you wanted to continue. It was you wanted to, you wanted to continue.
No, I want to stop.
No.
I can force it to continue. I want some people knowledge and stuff.
Yeah, there's none any more to stop.
More stocky money. Right.
And now,
Hang on, lads. Stop.
Stop.
exclamation the fickle figure of fate picks Barry
Oh God.
to pick from the box.
A random box. A random picking box. A random box full of discs. I should take off your glasses so I can't see what I'm doing. And
Okay, right.
That's one for Miles.
Right, Barry, you please read this in the manner of Lady Gurglefoot Snuffy.
bloody hell, shit.
But you, Tory MP.
No, that's Sybil Chutney Ferret. Excuse me, I'll have to go scoot down here so I can be seen by the bloody cameras. The book allegedly is survivalist. Number 3, The Quest by some joker called Jerry Ahern. So it's just slightly conservative editing.
Still on Earth.
Yes.
Barakov stared out of the balcony again at the skeletons of the mastodons. Kamarazov said he had slipped when Barakov asked him earlier that morning about the bruises on the right side of his face. And Natalia, Kamarazov had said, was feeling ill and might not be in for several days. Barakov had dispatched Vladimir Kamarazov and bloody Russians to the south.
That's because they'd invaded America.
Oh, not invading Ukraine then?
No.
Satire.
Or even Poland.
Political satire at that. To aid oh, for God's sake, to aid Colonel was like Korninsky, thank you, in setting up the new military district. There was a rough resistance movement forming in the area. Intelligence reported indicated. Ever since the business in Texas, Barakov had realised that Natalia had betrayed Kamarazov somehow, and that Kamarazov was not quite right in the head anymore. Oh, perhaps because of it. The aftermath of Barkov and the loss of Samuel Chambers had shown a ruthlessness in Kamarazov, and Barakov was always suspected, but never imagined in its scope. He had executed several of his own men for allowing the escape. He had used his forces to kill every suspected member of the Texas militia. A bloodbath Barakov had not seen the likes of since the purges in the 30s under Stalin. Or Tony Blair.
A box of mystery. I wondered whether Philip would like to take a shot at the box of mystery for us.
Yes. Right in the style of Brian Blessing.
There's a second layer as well.
Well, the journey to the final frontier of sci-fi zombie horror is a possibility. Night of the Living Trekkie. But how can that compete with War on Wugral? Which I think wins by an unpronounceable word and an unnecessary apostrophe. So just dip in at random.
There's always something bad in one of these.
And that night, when Holmes excused himself to go up to the roof, Reiser began all over again. I told you there had to be some changes, she stormed. A fine agent Holmes is, newspapers, writing on walls, stealing stupid flags. Propaganda is basically a matter of things like that, Plant said. It's all psychological trickery, nothing else. Remember the Terran World War II? Didn't they teach you in school? Of course, Reiser said. I know how these things ought to work. There ought to be mass meetings, burning down buildings, assassinations. Bloodthirsty little coordinator, aren't you? Plant asked. Remember, no loss of life. I seem to be in a boring talking bit. I'm going to sort of pop in the hope that it might be less boring. I'm disappointed. There's no sign of work yet.
Oh, well, you don't see the word growl right until the end. You only see the odd claw.
I didn't have a budget for the special.
Okay. talking and demurring and things for a long, long time, so I think I should probably skip, if that's allowed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's grand. Maybe we should have gone for the living trekkers after all. Let's try the start. Maybe that will allow. Prologue, the overdogs. Underdog, now, a person unnoticed by others as a result of his relatively small size on the scale of events. Note, the quotations used in this and in the epilogue to this history are from Volume 1, The Overdogs and Their History, of A History of the United Galaxy, published by Galactic Books, Unlimited. Permission to use this text has been prayed and granted. The last, and in many ways the most interesting, of the Overdog assignments was the task force located on Wograul. The activities of this task force are, for several reasons, worthy of study. We must, however, begin with a description of Wograul itself. Here we have a planet so much like Earth as to be almost an identical twin. If it is, in fact, slightly further from its home sun, that home sun is slightly hotter. If its landmass distribution, 2 immense continents, a few islands, an Arctic ice cap, and little else, is not Terran, its natives emphatically are. Their slightly less than Terran height has never been an important factor, and in fact the Overdog team itself required no special disguise to work on the planet, being at all times taken for exceptionally tall natives. Following Bergman's law that political structures can exist only in a limited and describable number of basic forms, it is still surprising to find the political arrangement of Wograul at the time of the Overdog mission as close an analogue to several Terran historical moments as it proved to be. Briefly, the separate continents were opposed, each continent having been unified by a single political system. On the continent originally called A, in early spy maps, was a nation which called itself Gelverb, a country organised around an idea basically fascistic. There the single leader ruled the state for the good of the state, his word being at all times simply and inarguably law. The continent called
North Korea, then.
The continent called B owned the name of the People's Democracy. There a communistic state was in power, and the rule of the sole leader was arranged for a system of laws which covered every eventuality. The good of the state was not the end stated to be in view here. Instead, all was dedicated to that mythical person, the people, who was felt to be served best by following the structure of laws. This opposition, not unknown in Terran history, was about to break into open war when the Overdogs arrived. Naturally, it was not their task to create peace, still less was it their task to support one or the other side, or even a third force, inimical to both. Instead,
What is their task?
Instead, thinking that their job, because of the great resemblances to Terran humanity and to Terran politics, would be a simple one, they landed under their normal directives. These directives, applied to a world which was at approximately the same level of development as 20th century Terra, were found to be more difficult of application than had been imagined. ... Multiplicity of the 4 dot ellipses. Oh, it could be. The ellipses, yeah.
It's like this huge pause.
Is that the underdog?
Oh, 20 people. Put that thumbs.
I think somebody needs to pay to stop this.
But it's like a few feet, the telephone's retro, we're fine.
Yes. We
Changes level.
All right.
Here's a thing. They stood in a corridor in the basement of the office building Plant worked in. A sign said, "To the fucked courts."
Where were we?
No loud noises.
Where were we at the stop and
Plant felt like they had the loudest possible series of noises.
Yeah, I haven't had any to carry on.
How much do we have to bid to carry on?
50p.
But we're being kind. I think we are about, I think, stop habit at the moment.
60p more to stop, to carry on.
I think stop still habit. I rather lost count there, I'm afraid. I think we were about £3.50 to stop.
We just got to the fut court. Let's see what fut is at least.
Okay, it's 50p to carry on. It's another 50p to carry on.
I don't actually play the game, he said, casually enough. From all I understand, it's more or less of a native pastime. Not like Confederation baseball, not that big or important. More like golf, or Tennis. But you don't know anything about it, Plant had asked. Only that it is a game, and apparently not too demanding. I mean, civil servants play it.
Civil servants play football.
Plant had been unable to
Doesn't
get more
seem
information.
surprising.
Of course, he could have gone through the libraries in search of material on the game, but he was supposed to be Commissar Sekisens, an avid FUT player. He would have looked odd, to say the least, hunting up elementary works on the subject. And the one advanced work he had chanced referring to had left him more confused than before. It was full of advice on what to do if your opponent smissed while the balls were in play, and even diagrams of a proper swing, which at least told Plant he was supposed to swing the single bat, unless he was supposed to swing the double balls.
This is cricket, isn't it? Cricket, isn't it?
In special cases where you were trying for a grand renewal. No. Unfortunately, the book was about as helpful. Unfortunately, the book was about as helpful a technical work on how to correct a slice would be to a man who had never heard of St Andrew. And now he knew one more thing. FUT players didn't like loud noises. Maybe if he made a loud enough noise. No, Plant told himself sternly, that would only be delaying the evil day.
So
somehow he was going to play FUT. After which, if by some miracle he remained undetected, he could go back to atomic fission.
It sounds very easy in comparison to FUT.
He sighed.
There'd be more of them.
He sighed deeply. Come on, sir, Twink said enthusiastically. I'll bet you've been waiting for this a long time. Certainly have, Plant said. He tried to make his voice sound hearty, but he had the distinct feeling that it sounded like a cry for help in Mammoth Cave. Twink trotted ahead and Plant followed, trudging like a man going to the scaffold. Soon, he told himself, it would all be over. He would be discovered, and all his plans would go for naught. And Raissa. He had to win, he thought, in a brief spurt of firmness. He had to win for Raissa. The thought brought up a mental picture of himself accepting the Woodralb Cup for setting a new record of 38 decibels and saying in modest tones, I owe it all to the little woman. So Raissa could not be described as a little woman, especially not in Woodralbian. Twink had reached the end of the corridor, and now he pushed open a door. Plant wondered in one whirling second just what a loud noise would be like. The place resounded with echoes, cries, groans, screams of encouragement. It was, he discovered as he came up behind Twink, a linked series of 5 square courts divided by wire netting. Around them on all 4 sides was a scaffolding which raised tiers of seats. And on the seats were spectators, natives in all varieties of dress, uniforms and civilian clothing, cheering and calling out advice. It was a lively picture. It made Plant think. Public executions. The players who were doing strange things in the courts were dressed in what seemed to be underwear. Let's strip down, Twink said enthusiastically, and letting the door swing shut behind him and Plant began quickly to do so. They were standing in a corridor leading to the courts, but as Twink reached the underwear level, he moved on until he was standing in the centre of the only empty court. He tossed his discarded clothing in the farthest corner, and Plant, feeling a little like September morn, only hairier. Likewise. Now what? He asked himself, wildly. Twink went to a post which stood about a third of the way from one side and was centred along the other wall. From a hook high off the ground, he removed a contraption which Plant recognised slowly as 2 round objects held together by a single stretched string. The double ball, he supposed. He's good. Twink, whirling the object, came back to the centre. Got the bat? He asked. Bat? Plant said. Gee, I don't have a bat with me. Sorry. Well, I guess if we don't have a bat, we can't. Oh, that's all right, Twink said. They always keep spares. He waved in the general direction of the farthest tier of spectators, and an attendant came trotting over. The attendant was dressed in form-fitting white and looked repulsively happy. Twink explained what was wanted, and the attendant ran off and returned with an object that looked rather like pictures Plant had seen of ancient Terran shillelaghs. The bat? Question mark. What'll take first turn? Twink said when the attendant had gone. Oh, Plant said. Why don't you lead off? All right, but that makes your handicap 8, remember? Twink, the bat in one hand, stepped back 1 pace, whirled the double ball and set it flying. As it left his hand, he cut at it with the bat, The ball went dizzily circling toward the post, hit it, nearly wrapped itself round the post, and then went glancing off, bouncing here and there as it went. Blunt and Twink watched it. When it had finally rolled to an awkward stop, Twink said, "Well, that's one." Blunt shrugged. "Certainly is," he said. A second passed. Then Twink said, "Well, go ahead. No sense thinking it over. I mean, it's only one." "True," Bart said, just as if he knew what was happening. I don't know how he'd feel. He accepted bat and balls from Twink and decided to try the same motion. At worst, he could make some joke to the effect that he was showing Twink how to play. He spun the balls, tossed them up and smacked them. The balls went end over end, spinning insanely.
Not again!
Towards the post.
A pound to stop.
Okay.
No, a pound to read that bit again.
Time to stop.
Stop.
That's a pound to read that last line again.
He spun the balls.
Another pound to
He
carry
spun the
on.
balls, tossed them up and smacked them.
Sorry, all right, wobblies. Wobblies.
Oh, yeah, the car.
If you haven't heard
Not starts.
well, okay, there's a pound for the starts.
Pound start. Not a pound start.
That's five all.
£30 to start.
There's some loose change to start. I'm going to get rid of it.
Another pound to start.
And we'll dress like this.
See, I have to, because my partner...
Roz,
So we don't
what do
have
we
to
have to do?
Oh, okay then.
Start.
No, no.
Right, okay.
We'll be dressed like this. We'll be in a car. No. Go to the place
Simon
there.
and his £20 note. It never goes in the box. What are we up to? Start.
No.
He has done a £10
Oh, there's
start.
a £3
We
not
had a
to.
stew yesterday.
The start still have it.
More
back to the
than
car.
8 pounds, did they?
Yeah.
Well, another 40p start. Yeah.
21 start.
To start, yeah.
Yeah.
He's not making them pay for this.
Space
Then we're
Detective.
playing that
We'll
one.
see what else
Short
is
story 5.
on.
Wobblies.
Go on,
Can we
go on.
get lamb jog then? Can we get lamb jog?
In. It says in. Wobblies in the moon. In the moon.
Well, you see, it's a giant egg, so it's perfectly logical.
John, wake up! Vera Darn screamed, pounding on the door of Carstairs' sleeping cart. The Wobblies have broken loose! The curator of the Interplanetary Botanical Garden stirred, yawned, turned over, and buried his head in his bedclothes. He sighed. John, let me in! Open the door! The Wobblies! Carstairs leapt up in consternation, throwing back the bedclothes so violently that they wrapped themselves around his long legs and sent him sprawling. Shivering, he groaned, rolled over, and struggled into his sitting position. Take it easy, Vera, he muttered, knuckling sleep from his eyes. The blasted things aren't flesh eaters. Oh, but darling, if we should lose them, our rare specimens, walking around loose. Can you blame me for getting excited? No, I suppose not, Carstairs grunted. Open the door yourself, it's not locked. The door opened a crack, and the pale face of John Carstairs' attractive, coppery-haired secretary came into view, wrapping the bedclothes tightly around his rangy bulk. Carstairs arose and crossed to the window. When he pulled up the shade, a glint of earthlight from the lunar Apennines grazed his pupils, dazzling him. He blinked and stared out at the towering peaks, which he had been contemplating in the office several days now. Vera was sitting on the edge of the bed when he turned, her hands clasped around her knees. It'll be a shock to Gleason, she said. One of them came into my room and climbed out of the window. May I just take this point to remind you that the story is called Wobblies in the Moon. It's set on the moon. I climbed out of the window. I encountered another in the corridor. When I tried to catch it, it hurled a nettle at me. It's still here, in my shoulder. She turned and bared a portion of her right shoulder. Half buried in her flesh was a huge downy nettle. It was strawberry coloured and 5 or 6 inches in diameter. It brought a shiver to Carstairs' spines, and can you blame him? We'll get it out, he said. They are loathsome creatures, but worth their weight in platinum. The average adult walkaway weighs about 200 kilos or so. You don't seem very upset about losing them, Vera retorted. They're probably streaking back to the mountains by now.
So Carstairs is wearing a sheet. Vera Dawn now has her shoulder exposed.
And we've got streaking plants.
Yes, that's right. Probably. Why not?
Still better science than the Doctor Who Moonade episode.
What else? The yakety axe in the background.
Right, I'll skip
Science
it.
is beautiful.
Gleason is an extremely wealthy man. He doesn't have to collect... Oh, sorry, that's wrong advice. That's fiercely. Gleason is an extremely wealthy man. He doesn't have to collect specimens for you. He's a good egg, Carstairs grunted, but vain. Endowing our lunar expeditions and collecting for us puffs him out like a kid's toy balloon. He likes to pose as a scientific big shot. If I had a glassite wall palace on the moon decked out with 7 black plastic bathrooms, I'd forget about science with a capital S. I'd just be myself.
Black plastic bathrooms.
Seven of them.
Small taste.
50 feet of stop.
We have 50 feet of stop, and then we carry on.
£2 to carry on. Go for it, yeah.
I never thought you were
£1 to carry on.
No pound to carry on. More to carry on. More to carry on. Yeah.
Right, I'll skip the a bit of boring stuff. Unless you want to hear the black plastic bathroom bit.
Black bathroom half there. Yeah, that one.
If I had a glassite wall palace on the moon decked out with 7 black plastic bathrooms, I'd forget about science with a capital S. I'd just be myself. Right.
I'd be more concerned if my palace walls are made of glass about everyone staring in through my bath. There's nobody out there except wobblies.
That's probably why he had the black bath, so he can show his outline more, you know.
Anyway.
Something.
Vera stiffened in sudden horror. A piercing, long drawn-out scream howled reverberated across the glassite-walled sleeping turret, congealing her vocal cords and turning Carstairs' blood to ice. It was followed by a silence so cloying that it seemed to muffle the tick of Carstairs' Greenwich-synchronized wristwatch.
That was the wristwatch.
Which makes an odd chiming sound. With a startled oath, he snatched an oxygen mask from an overnight bag, clamped it on his face, and rushed to the window. Throwing the casement wide, he strolled out onto the rail of observation.
He's got an oxygen mask which she hasn't.
We're getting to that. That point will be addressed in a moment.
It's obviously a positive pressure plastic.
Throwing the casement wide, he strolled out onto the railed observation platform which half encircled Gleason's tower-like dwelling. A strangle... No, he's still got the thing that sheet around his ragey bulk.
But how did he grab the mask if he was holding his sheets around his rangy bulk?
He's only...
He didn't say he tucked it in.
He's a hero.
He's a hero.
You've seen the film, sheets covering modesty defy gravity. They just do.
A strangled sound came from behind him. He swung about, his lips tightening. Vera was standing just outside the window. Help! She joked. That scream came from downstairs. You can't see anything from here. Nor can you actually hear because you're on the balcony. We're getting to that bit. Please be patient. The wobblies won't be visible in this glare. The scream came again. It was audible now on the platform. Which seemed to drift up from below. coming from Gleason's sleeping turret. Carstairs said he sleeps with his oxygen mask on and his windows flung wide. I just wanted to make sure. Then why are we standing here? Vera choked. Oh, he's dying. Well, this is because she hasn't got a bloody oxygen mask. Will you be patient?
How can they hit? He's got a mask on. How can she hear what he's saying? She doesn't say muffled or, you know, muffled by the mask.
There's a big up a speech bubble.
Get back inside, Carstairs rapped. You ought to have more sense than to come out here without a mask. You see, everything comes to those who wait. John, are the Wobblies attacking you? It couldn't be the Wobblies. They're not carnivorous, and their nettles merely irritate the skin a little. Now get back before your lungs buckle into folds.
Hang on, so 5-inch diameter.
And it just irritates the skin a bit, yeah. It punches straight through the skin into your heart, but it does just irritate the skin.
You know what, being stabbed in the heart, giant 5-inch nettle probably would be a bit irritating.
Vera obeyed. She didn't stay in Carstairs' turret, but ran breathlessly, funnily enough, through the door and down a cold lighted...
So the door's open. So all the air from the corridor is also then...
As in here through the door.
What? How
It's like Space 1999 all over again.
But
No,
worse.
she's not running in slow motion.
Or when it flares.
The two aspiring flight of black plastic stairs. At least they're not vapour-like, come on. Down them she raced, oblivious to the torment in her lungs. Carstairs descended in slower strides, but the length of his legs kept him constantly at her side. With almost simultaneous movements, he had thrown off the blanket, pushed up the oxygen mask over his forehead, and wrapped the dressing gown around his rangy.
Oh.
Why do you need to pull the...
How can you run
Man's got to do that.
You know, rangy, tall, and sort of somewhat muscled.
Like an oven.
More of a 4-pack than a 6-pack. Take it easy, Vera, he cautioned. If you drop dead, you'll be sorry later on.
Please, God. Stop. £2 to stop. Are we out of time?
We're almost out of time.
Yes, £1 to stop. £3 to stop.
£2 to go on.
It's 2 to go on, so it's 3 to 2 to stop at the moment.
How much time to go on?
Right, it's 3 to go
If we
on.
stop this, do we have time?
We don't have time for anything else.
Oh.
Carry on then.
Carry on.
I've
Right,
got
stop. Well, it has 3 to stop, but I think there's more to carry on.
Yes, there's more to carry on. That's the money to stop.
This is to carry on, and
Yeah.
this is
This
to
way.
carry on as well as a
Yeah.
bit.
Any more to carry on?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, there are always more carry on.
Excuse me, I'll just have a quick...
It was 2 to carry on from here, wasn't there, to stop from here?
Horrifying moments.
Who else was it? Stop somewhere over here?
It was 2 from you to stop.
That was me.
Take it easy, Vera, he cautioned. If you drop dead, you'll be sorry later on.
Yeah, Stephen Moffat's got designs on your soul.
Yeah.
Okay. They get down to Carstairs. In the centre of the turret stood 3 huge Wobblies. Their tendrils were weaving about in the gloom, and they had grouped themselves in a semicircle around the rigidly distorted figure of Gleason. Like plant ghosts, they seemed. They hovered above him, their body roots glowing with a faint spectral radiance. Unutterably terrifying they seemed. But what drove the blood in torrents from Vera's heart was this huge nettle. Was Gleason's bulging eyes and gruesomely sardonical grin. How she can see the gruesomely sardonical grin under the oxygen mask, I'm not quite sure. But
Oh, but it's illuminated by the photoluminescence
You see,
of the wobbly at Christmas past, Christmas present, Christmas
John!
future, it sounds like.
he's dead!
But you'll regret it later on.
She asked, her voice like a whisper from the tomb. Blah, blah, blah. John, did these ghastly things attack him? Carstairs shook his head. How many times must I tell you that wobblies are not flesh eaters? They hurl nettles to protect themselves from their natural enemies, but otherwise they're harmless. Which natural enemies they have, we have no idea. But, you know, some things you have to...
Presumably balloons.
When Gleason observed them in the mountains, he took copious notes. They're freakish, but harmless perambulating plants. I always like to get the perambulating plants because it's
Just imagine out in the park, pushing the perambulators.
Well, how do you think the little ones get round? It's rough out there on the moon. There's all that moon dust and all that rocks and everything. Regolith.
And of course, with the low gravity on the moon, Sherry Bobbins has no trouble floating by on the moon.
I think we might have to
I think
stop
we
there.
might
We've
have to.
got about 25 minutes before we're going to start setting. We've got to start setting up the auction.
Okay, well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for enduring this.